All right, so welcome back. It's been a long time since before Tishrei, and we're in chapter 29, Perach Tes, of our Sefer Yonish Moshiach, and hi Rifki, we were talking about the Hiskalos of Mashiach, and so we were saying that there are different views. The view of earlier we were talking about the fact that um, that Rizal and even the some Cipher talked about the fact that there is a tzaddik in a generation who gets at some point a revelation of the Ruach Mashiach when he realizes that he's Mashiach, and then he starts doing actions for Mashiach. But according to Chassidus, the Rebbe tells us that actually every single generation, it's not that there's a tzaddik as one thing, and then the Ruach of Mashiach as another thing, and that at some point they come together. Rather, that there is a person who already has all that potential, who is Mashiach of the generation. But there comes a time when he then knows that he is that person. Okay, so there's a revelation of that koyach that was already there. So it's not a new koyach that he gets, but a koyach that's there is revealed. And then there is another stage where he actually starts acting on that. So tonight we're going to see an example of how that was historically, and specifically in the Malchus of Shlomo and Shaul Hamelech. Okay, so I'll start and then I'll hand over. So we have here, okay, Hiskalos Malchus Shlomo v'Shaul. To really understand what we mean when we say that according to Chassidus, it's not that there's a Ruach of Mashiach that goes into a tzaddik in a generation, but that in every generation there's a person who has that Ruach, and at some point he knows who he is. What does this mean that there's a revelation of his Metzias? Okay, that his Metzias becomes known. So we'll bring an example of something that we know about. And perhaps we could say it's even exactly the same thing as what we're talking about. And what is that? So we're going to start off, first of all, even though Shaul chronologically came first and then it was Shlomo Hamelech, we're going to start by first explaining Shlomo Hamelech and what the Rebbe talked about the Malchus of Shlomo, and then we'll go on to Shaul. When we know about the fact that when Shlomo Hamelech was coronated, when Shlomo became Melech, it happened actually in a number of stages. It didn't just happen overnight. What do we mean by that? So first of all, we know Shlomo Hayaroy Lemlucha Me'azlei Dasai. As soon as Shlomo Hamelech was roy to be king already, as soon as he was born. Like we've mentioned already in our earlier chapters, David Hamelech Hirish Lazarai Acharav as Kesser Malchus. So we know David Hamelech had already been promised before that, and he was going to give as an inheritance to his male offspring this title, right? This throne of kingship. And that Kesser Malchus, what do we talk about when we say he gave that as an inheritance? That's the power of Melucha, and that idea that his neshama is actually higher. It's a superior neshama. So it's a primistic thing. And this is something that existed, that was given from David to every single one of his appropriate male sons from the moment that they were born, including Shlomo Hamelech. Now, in addition to that, right, not only that, but Haisa, Mila Miyuchedesh Shlomo. Shlomo also had a unique Mila. What was that? So what was unique about Shlomo Hamelech is that it's not only that he was general, that David Hamelech was passing on this koyach to every single one of his male offspring, but David got a specific nevuah from Hashem that he was going to have a son who was going to be the next king. And the end, when Shlomo was born, Nishba David lebat Sheva, Aim Shlomo, Shekach Achen Yiyeh. So as soon as Shlomo Hamelech was born, we see that David actually told Bathsheba, who was the mother of Shlomo Hamelech, that is what it's going to be. Umikol b'nei David, Shlomo, who's there, sheyeshiv al kisei acharav. So he told, as soon as Shlomo Hamelech was born, that was the message that David gave Bathsheba. This child, this Shlomo Hamelech, he is the one who's going to be the next king. Okay, so that means that already from the very beginning, as soon as he was born, he was already designated. He was king. So despite the fact that he was already marked as the next king, and he had the nevuah of the next king, he had the koyach, the neshama koyach to be the next king, practically, it wasn't yet his time to physically be the king. So before he became the king, he was a man like every other man. He was a person like any other person. He wasn't any greater than any of the other people. Because when he was born at the koyach, he was dedicated, he had that koyach, but that koyach was hidden. Now, when David Hamelech became older, so we know from David that we have the story. As soon as David Hamelech was older, suddenly Adoniyahu made himself, great, and started claiming that he's going to be the king. And because Adoniyahu did this, then so at that point, when Bathsheba heard the news that Adoniyahu was going around saying, I'm going to be the next king and making a coronation for himself. So Bathsheba came to David to remind him. He said, you told me that my son's going to be the next king. That on that very same day, David commanded they should go immediately and anoint Shlomo Hamelech as the king. And then they should make that pronouncement that Yechi Hamelech Shlomo, right? Long live King Shlomo. So we see Shlomo Hamelech from the moment he was born. He was marked. He had the neshama to be the next king. Lived a regular life. He's crowned king, or anointed, you should say, really anointed king during the time of David Hamelech because of this fight, you could say, or argument over that Adoniyahu caused. But even after this, after there was a Hamshachah, he was anointed already, and everybody called out Yechi Hamelech Shlomo. Hanhagat HaMelucha b'Payal nish'ar b'dei David ad Yisal Kusai. But practically speaking, Shlomo Hamelech didn't take over the throne during the lifetime of his father. The actual practical leadership, the Melucha, stayed in the hands of David until he passed away. Rak Acha Arichas Yimei David. Yashav Shlomo al Kisi David Aviv. V'hini gat HaMelucha b'Payal. So it was only after David's long life, okay, so or the length of his days had finished, which was really not that long, 70 years. Then Shlomo Hamelech then sat on his father's throne, and that's when he practically led the kingdom. So the Rebbe deals with this. So what was really the meaning of this coronation of Shlomo Hamelech in the life of David? If practically, so what was that whole thing? What was the point of coronating him if he practically did not become the king yet? What really happened? What was accomplished with that haftarah at that point in time? Now, Rabbi Isaac with Mashmos Haftarasai Shoshlomo b'Chayi David. I'm sorry. Okay, Umavars. The Rebbe explains what actually happened. So what we see is that even though Shlomo Hamelech merited to have this crown of Melucha as soon as he was born, because he was an appropriate child, right? He was an offspring that was roy to be the king. And he really did have that koyach melucha already. Nevertheless, as long as David Hamelech was still living, was actually still ruling, so even though he was the right kind of a person, he was roy, he had the koyach already, but as long as his father was still physically ruling, so as long as that was happening, this koyach of melucha that Shlomo Hamelech had was really only in sort of potential. It was the koyach, but didn't really come out in practicality. He ain't hechach sheyimlach b'payal because there was no way, there wasn't any possibility for him to actually physically rule. Let me buy it to Shlomo shahayu like achim ve'evadal shul yemelach elagam im yemeduber b'ben yachid. Right? After she Yamuz ben b'chaya aviv olam lo yimchul payal. Right? So, in other words, as soon as David was there, it wasn't an absolute must that he was going to actually rule, because we could say, and we're not even talking. We're talking about Shlomo Melech. He already had other brothers, right? So because he already had other brothers, you could say it's no certainty that he's going to be the one who actually become king. He could have had other brothers getting up and arguing it. But even if you were talking about a ben Yachid, let's say Shlomo Melech didn't have other brothers and he was just the one son. So, it's possible that even if you have a king and who has a child and you say, okay, the child, like the prince, right? He's the next in line to the king and he's the next in line. This is something that's forever in the news nowadays with the whole thing with the coronations in England, the idea that there are people and there's in line to the throne. So even if someone was a ben Yachid, it could be that child would pass away still while his father was alive and he would never end up ruling. In other words, even if you have a king and you have a child who's right to be the king and has the right character traits to be the king, there's no guarantee while the actual king, the father, is still living, that child is going to rule one day. But what was the difference with Shlomo? So what happened here was, because it wasn't just that he was right to be king and he had all the characteristics and he was the male son, but because David chose Shlomo and commanded that he be anointed, so because of that caused that certainty and gave him the name of a king while David was still alive. In other words, not only that in the future he would inherit the Melucha, but he already could be called, like the crown prince, could already be called the king. Because he's the crown, he already has this keser. But the leadership was still only through David. But once Shlomo Melech was actually anointed, he was the future King Shlomo Melech. He was King Shlomo. Because as soon as he had that Shem HaMishcha, he already had Keser Malchus. So what do we see when the Rebbe explained this? We see that really, when we talk about Shlomo as king, there were actually 3 stages. Aleph, what was the first stage? There was Koyach HaMelucha Be'etzem, okay, in his essence, that he had the Koyach, the potential for Melucha. In other words, he already had this Koyach HaMelucha from the moment he was born, because he was a male offspring of David, who had been promised that his male offspring would forever have this Koyach. But this is purely something that was hidden, that was in potential, but not actually coming out in any action. And therefore, the name Melech was not, you couldn't use the name Melech. Right? You could have lots of princes, you can't call them kings. And even when a male offspring was born, a male son, there's no absolute definitive that this son is actually going to rule one day. And it's very possible that a male son can be born, and it could be possible that one day he would not rule. And the same thing could have happened with Shlomo. He was born, he had the potential, he could have been, but there was no guarantee necessarily that would definitely have happened. Second stage, Shei Melech. He gets the name king. That happened as soon as he was anointed by his father. At that point, once he had that Shem HaMishcha, then he's already called the king from that point on. Like it says in Navi, like the Navi says, as soon as they anointed him, they made that proclamation, Yechi HaMelech Shlomo, long live the King Shlomo. David was still alive. They still called him the King Shlomo. They let him ride on the king's horse. They let him sit on the king's chair, throne. And all this was done on the explicit command of David HaMelech himself. Now, up until that point, until the point where David commanded that they anoint Shlomo, if anyone had called Shlomo the king, Shlomo Melech, or if Shlomo had dared to ride on the king's horse or sit on his throne, right, it would have been considered someone who is being married b'malchus, rebelling against the king. Sherei Achel Rak David won Melech v'lo Shlomo, because only David was the king, not Shlomo. Ach ke'es la'achar shenimshel Shlomo v'chol olav shem Melech. But once David commanded that he be anointed, and he was anointed with the Shem and Mishka, now he has the name king. And from that point on, you had to go in front of him, like the idea of a king, people go in front of them and call out, Yechi Hamelech, long live the king. Because as soon as he was anointed, he is now the king in present tense. However, we see from the rest of the Sikha, so while he could be called the king, and he had some of those, you could say, honors, but all the laws of king did not yet apply to him. Because many of the laws of a king, for example, that he has to hold the Sefer Torah with him at all times, have his own Sefer Torah printed, and the ideas of marriage, of who can marry, and the horses, and all of these things, they are for a king when he's actually practically leading the kingdom. Therefore, Adoniyahu was not killed at that point, because even though he was considered to be like a Marei, he was rebelling against the Malchus of Shlomo, but he wasn't killed because he wasn't completely a Marei b'Malchus, because Shlomo, the laws of king didn't yet apply to Shlomo. So he couldn't be a Marei b'Malchus against Shlomo Melech because he wasn't practically yet ruling. And then we have the third stage. What's the third stage? Hanhagas Malchus b'Payam, practically leading the kingdom. That, the idea of practically leading the kingdom of the Jewish people, that responsibility, or that stage, only happened after David's life. So once David was rest with his fathers, passed away, then Shlomo was able to lead the Melucha. And at that point, all the laws of the king applied to him. All the laws of the things the king had to do, and all the laws that apply for Bnei Yisrael toward a king. So all the ideas of being married by Malchus and having to listen to everything the king says, and all the in other words, anything we know as the laws of the king. Okay, so there are these three particular steps. Now we're going to see that this idea we also see in the words of the Rebbe Rashab. So Rivki, would you like to continue?
I'll try. Actually, the Suda of a bris, but it just finished. My grandson, Baruch Hashem.
Mazel tov.
Wow, Mazel tov, Rivki. Wow.
Thank you. V'ayfen pnimi yaser v'signain hasbara shal teres chassidus anu mitzayim es aisam shleisha shlavim dargais b'skalos kayach malchus b'dvarav shal admar harashab nishmas Eden. So in a more pneumistic way, the way Chassidus explains it, so we find that these three levels, these three stages in the revelation of the Malchus, in the words of the Rebbe Rashab, Aleph, koyach hamlucha shebe'etzmam nefesh, koyach ze ina sheikh l'shum gilei klal, ad she'ina gam b'fchinas makar l'makar l'mlucha, me'achar she'ina b'geder gilei klal choloi. So the first is the koyach hamlucha, that's in the etzem nefesh, because this has no revelation at all, and it's not even a source for the melucha because there is no revelation at all, and it's possible that it will never become revealed. Beis kasher machtirim es hamelech b'keser malchus demiyad shenichtar b'keser malchus harei hu nikra melech umevar al zeh the inyan achtara ma shekibel olav keser malchus zehu shenis'er batzmusay baratzin shel al melucha v's'ayru zu af shehu behelam menafshay baratzin klali al klolos in hamelucha מכל מקום, הרי הוא מקר למקר שמשם ימשך ההשתררות והממשלה בסנסוס על ממש, ויסקלו כל הרצונס פרוטים השייכים לעניין המלוכה בפרט בהנהגה ממש בהחוקים בענייני המדינה וכולי. ולכן מיד שנכתב בכסר, היינו שנסר ברצון כללי על עניין המלוכה, הרי הוא מיד מלך משטרר ומיישל, מפני שכבר נשכל בנפשי ועשה לבוא לידי גילוי ממש וכולי. So the second stage is when he is crowned. So he's already called a king. And the explanation on this is that the crowning, the fact that he received the crown of Malchus, that awakens in him the desire of the Melucha, and it awakens that which was, no, it is still hidden in his nefesh. It's just a general then desire on the general idea of Malchus. But this is already the source that from there he will be ruling, and he will be higher than the nation. And then all the ritzonos, all the details will be that have a connection to Melucha will be revealed in his actions and in ruling the nation. And that's why when he is awarded, when he's crowned with a crown, so this kalistik haratzon of Melucha is aroused, and he is already a melech. He's already a melech, and that can rule, because it was already revealed. But only in the future will it be revealed in actuality.
Sorry,
So there's, so in
is
other words,
is it a fact that he will for sure be revealed as king, or like in the
what's the hachtara? So in other words, there's the etzem in the neshama, and we're going to see more examples. You'll see more again how it works out. So it's when it's the atma in the neshama, the person themselves might not even know. Right?
right?
It could be
But the Ben Yachid, it said that even though he's a Ben Yachid, it could be they would pass away, and he wouldn't actually be revealed, even though it's like
yeah. So that's where it's like a be'etzem a nefesh, because like we said when we said that bit that
right,
you
it
might
doesn't
not
have
even
to be
know it,
revealed. But
right?
after there's an haftara, is it guaranteed that it's going to be revealed one day? Like it's not going to stand that level, meaning.
Yeah, I just want to see here. Right, this was level. Which was level that? Yeah, but that's before. In other words, at that level where there's just
Right.
the koyach be'etzem,
So
no
what-
guarantee.
Right.
Once there's a hachtara, that's already a guarantee. That's what we're saying.
Guaranteed.
Once
It
you already
will
have
be
Shem
revealed.
Melech, then that's already, it's not just the koyach melucha that's the etzem nefesh. That's almost like there's potential. And it could maybe never come out. But the second level, when there's a hachtara already,
Well, for
hachtara
sure
means
comes to
that
level
if you
three.
think about, yeah, because you think about Rosh Hashanah, when we talk about why do we have to crown Hashem as our king, we say because when we crown Hashem as our king, we are under the rotzen of Hashem to rule over us. The same thing with the person who has the koyach hamlucha be'etzem, the hachtara arouses within them that general concept of kingship, right? That's the second level. And that's the general, from there comes the possibility that he will actually be the king. Right? But that's the hachtara, that's step number 2. And then what's step number 3? Rifki, go ahead, Gimel.
Hanhagay samachos b'paya, actually ruling. Gili midas hamlucha b'spashtos gedulasei al hamedina. V'kulam isbatkan lefana v'hu manhigam tirtzainei b'chol inyanim b'pnimis v'chitzainis v'choli. So this is the revelation of the Melucha and the spreading of his greatness on the whole nation, and everyone is buckled to him and has to act according to his will in all inyanim, in pnimius and in chitzonis.
Exactly. And now we see that the Rebbe Rasha brings an example when he's with Shaul Hamelech. Go ahead.
ואדמר הרשע מביא על זה את הדוגמה משאול המלך, שלאחר שנמשך למלך על ידי שמואל, חזר לביתו בגבעת שאול לחרש בסודס, כאילו לא היה דבר. So Rabbi Shah brings an example from Shaul HaMelech, that after he was anointed by Shmuel, he returned to his home in Givat Shaul, and he was plowing the fields as if nothing happened. Ach kavor zman ma, הגיע השמוע שנחש מלך בני עמין עולה להילחם בתושבי יבש גלעד, אז שמע שאול וייחר אפי ולקח בקר ונתח חסר ל12 נסכים ושלח בכל שבטי ישראל להודיע שמי שלא יצא אחר שאול למלחמה כן יעשו לבקרי. One second, yeah. So, but time passed, and Shaul heard that Nachash of Ammon went to fight with Yavesh Gilad. So when he heard that, he got angry, and he took an ox and cut it into 12 pieces, and he sent it to each of the Shvatim, and let them know that those who will not go after Shaul in war, this will happen to their oxen. ואז יצאו אחריו 100,000 מישראל, והיכה את בני עמי והשיח יבש גלעד. And so then 100,000 of Jews went after him, and they killed Bnei Ammon, and they saved Yavesh Gilad. ומאז עשה מעשה ואילך כבר לא ישב שאול על השדות, אלא הנהיג מלוכה בפרעה. And from that moment, Shaul did not go back to the fields. He ruled the nation. He ruled the kingship, the kingdom, in actuality. ומבאר שם שבעץ המשיחה על ידי שמואל, היסה בנפש שאול, המשחוס נעלמס על עין המלוכה. והלכות הפנימי שסוף כל סוף הוא יצטרך להנהיג את ישראל להושיע עשה מכל צריהם. And it's explained there that when Shaul was anointed by Shmuel, so Shaul had it was brought upon him but I guess still hidden, the Melucha, and there was an inner decision that at some point he will have to lead Bnei Israel and will have to save them from their enemies. And the situation that happened with Bnei Ammon, it was just a opportunity to awaken that which was hidden and to reveal it. And therefore, when all Bnei Israel heard about the tragedy of the problem that the people of Gilad, Yeshve Gilad were, and they cried, Shaul was the only one who actually did something, and he took the nation to war because he knew that this is his, that the achrayus is on him. And therefore, even at the time when he was just anointed, he was also considered already a king.
Right. Is that your background? Cleaning up?
Yeah, I'll move to another room. 1 minute. To clean the table.
Okay. Right. So we see then again. So he was before he was Shaul HaMelech. He gets anointed, but it's like a dormant, right? It's there, but it's dormant. He went back like nothing happened until it came to the point when he started acting on it. And once he had to acting on it, then it was another story. And he knew he had to act because he was the one who had been appointed. He was the one who had that kaya. What do we find? We see how the Rebbe Rashab explained all of this, and he connected it to Shaul HaMelech. But we can see, it's very easy to see how what the Rebbe Rashab explained is very similar to the explanation of the Rebbe about Malchus Shlomo HaMelech, and it helps us understand it on a deeper level. He's there sheketzer malchus. Hakaim etz Shlomo who rocked the koyach leib b'payel. He ain't hechashim lach b'payel. So when we say that the Kesser Malchus that Shlomo Melech had, that it was only in potential, but not b'payel, because there was no definite absolute that Shlomo was going to be the king. It wasn't just like a technical thing. Like we said, like the Rebbe explains, look at the sickness there, that perhaps, a child will die in the life of his father, and therefore he'll never rule. And legamu beikar b'tzad etzma inyan shekesar malchus hakolu be'etzem hanefesh eina shayach l'shum gilui klal. It's not just that he could possibly die, but the idea of having an etzem hanefesh idea of koyach means that kesar malchus that's in the etzem hanefesh doesn't have any revelation. Because it has no revelation. When we say there's a koyach of keser malchus, that's why it could very well be that it's never revealed at all. And the fact that when Shlomo was coronated, then everyone was able to, you could call him a king. It wasn't just this external thing. Okay, now people can call him a king. Etc. It wasn't just this external thing that, okay, now people can call him a king, and now they can treat him like a king, and now they can let him sit on the throne, etc. But rather the coronation itself becomes something very true on an inner level. That at that time of the Hachtara, like we saw with Shlomo, and then it was Shaul as well. That means as soon as they're Hachtara, the person in his etzem, he now knows there is an arousal of his desire to be for the kingship. So because of the etzem nefesh, the midah hamlucha was there. It was rooted in him, in that person. Therefore, when we have the hachtara, that draws down that melucha that was hidden, draws it down into reality. It's that the point that the person actually feels it and has this ratzon then to be king. And that's why. That means that as soon as he was actually anointed, that means that from that point on, he's now ready to lead the people. His Aruzu, because that is Irus of the coronation, that was he makar lemakar, shemisham yumshach hishtaris v'amshal, like we said, the Rebbe Rashab said. That is Iris of the Hachtara. That's the source for the source later where he'll actually rule. We'll actually lead them with all the laws and everything. And the fact that he didn't. In other words, if you arouse this, if you say, okay, so you have Hachtara, and that arouses this Ratzon from Lucha, so why doesn't he immediately rule? The fact that he doesn't immediately rule is that there were technical external reasons for that. So Shlomo was because there's no need for it because David was still alive. And with Shaul, there was no need because it wasn't yet time for him to act on it. There was no danger. Okay? Right? For Shlomo was like David was still alive. But as soon as he passed away, then Shlomo took on that leadership as was expected of him because he had been crowned. Okay, so we see very clearly from the Rebbe explaining Shlomo Hamelech, from the way the Rebbe Rashab explained how Shaul was anointed, and from all of this, we can understand about Mashiach. So Rivki, now you're in a quiet room. Go ahead.
And with all these these examples, now we can understand about Melech HaMashiach. כי בכל דור ישנו משיח שבכל דור מזרע דוד שיש בו כסר מלכות של דוד. עצם מידס המלוכה הנטוע ומושרש בעצם הנפש. כנ"ל. So in every generation, there's a Mashiach of that generation who's from the family of David. Then he has the Keser Malchus of David, the midah of the etzem midah malucha, which is in his etzem nefesh, as explained above. Ach zehu rak b'koyach ubehelem ba'omek nafshay bein hechrech shu achin yiskalav yimlech b'koyel ki tochen shlo yiskoi seador leguula b'koyel. But this is only in koyach, and it's hidden in the depth of his nefesh, and not necessarily will be revealed, and he will actually rule, because it's possible that this door will not be zeicha to the actual gula. Lacher became a giazman shall his galus mitzius say betor melch Mashiach. Shezui beikar is galus ruchnis nafshis. Shemargish ba'atzmoi shlichus v'achrayis v'koyach lahavias agula l'chol ha'olam. Ki dugma Shaul shevichar apai v'hichlit she'olav l'shias Yisrael. So after that, there comes a time of the revelation of his being Melech, Mashiach. This is in a ruchnistic way, in an afshistic way, that he feels himself the shlichus and the achrayis and the koyach, that he can bring the geula to the whole world. Like we saw by the example of Shaul, that he got angry and he decided that he's going to save Bnei Yisrael.
Going to, but that he has a responsibility, right? So he recognized now's the time to get up and do what he knows that he's required to do, because he was the one who was anointed, right? He's the one who acted.
Azai Mashiach Shemai Nikra Kevan Shesayra Zu Tavi Behechrach Lehemshech Hanhaga Bepoyel Shel Yisrael. And at this point, we can already call him Mashiach, because this arousal will bring him to act in this way with Bnei Yisrael, right? To lead Bnei Yisrael and to fix the world. So it's seemingly understood that already at this stage we could already give him the title Melech HaMashiach, and we could already announce Yechia Melech, as was explained about Shlomo, that at the time when he was anointed, he was already called Melech, even though his father was still ruling. His scholars le'inyan kol al yidei puloisav she'achain manhiges Yisrael b'koyel ad shemevi lahem gula shlema hechel me'amatzav shel cheskas Mashiach va'ad l'matzav shel Mashiach v'adai she'oz cholam olav dinei melech v'dinei Mashiach kemuvan halachasi. And after that comes the third stage, which is the revelation in to everyone about what he's doing, that he's actually ruling Bnei Yisrael, and he brings about the Gula Shlema, starting from the Cheskas Mashiach until actually becomes Mashiach Vadai. And then at that point, then he will already have all the laws of the Melech and laws of Mashiach according to Halacha. ששלב זה הוא תוצאה מספגשת ומוכרחת מהשלב הקודם, בו הסגלסה מציאוסו של מלך המשיח. So this stage is a תוצאה, is a outcome, no, I could say it in Russian, one that has to happen, an outcome that must be, because it's a continuation of the previous stage, where his Matthias, Melech HaMashiach, was already revealed. As an example of Shaul and Shlomo, that when the desire for the Melucha was aroused and he was already called Melech, so it will lead to being lead to the full revelation. And this is as the Rebbe explained further in the Sikha of Toldos Tafshin Nun Beis. Ikar Chidush al Bias HaMashiach hu bizgalos metziusei. The Chidush of Mashiach coming will be in the revelation of who he is. Ki kol pratei henyanim shel achar zeh is galusay le'en kol al yidei pulois of Golos Yisrael v'chol henyanim d'yimei Mashiach boim ki toitza v'histafus mihisgalos metziusei ukula ba. So all that which will come after that, all the details in everything that will come after that, and that he will be revealed to everyone through his actions to redeem Bnei Yisrael and all of the other things that have to happen in the time of Mashiach, they all come as a outcome and from the revelation that was before, that was included in it from before.
Yes. Okay. So that's the key thing. The whole Chiddush is on the Metzius. So there's revelation of the Metzius, which means there's a Hachtara, there's a Ratzon, and then what happens after that? Zois v'oid. If you look really carefully, where the Rebbe talks about this revelation of Mashiach, the Rebbe says that this second hisgalus, right? There's hisgalus of Metzias, and then there's hisgalus le'ein kol, to everyone through his actions. Now, from what the Rebbe is saying, you can understand the opposite, right? From what he said is going to happen, you can understand what's not. I mean, the first revelation, hisgalus Metzius b'tor Melech Mashiach, the fact that there is this revelation of who he is, and it could be a revelation only to him, right? That he understands and knows, finds out that he has to act. He is the Mashiach. At that point, he's not known to everyone. Okay, because after you see how the Rebbe is saying, and afterwards, everything else that is known through all his actions, that comes later as a hamshach of the first one. And we understand this in a very, very simply. The actions of what Mashiach does, everybody can actually see. We find the Rambam says the same thing. That when you see certain actions start happening, right? It's based on the actual actions of Mashiach that we then see it and we then recognize, oh, this is Cheskas Mashiach, or eventually with the building of the Beit HaMikdash and the gathering of all the people of Mashiach Vadai. But that first level, where the Rebbe says that's the key of our generation, it says that is mainly a ruchnistic, primistic, and neshama knowledge that Mashiach gets, but it's for him. Nobody else knows it. There's no practical, tangible things he's going to do that other people are going to look at, but in this physical world that are going to know, oh, this is what it is. So that first level, that first revelation as such, there's no chiyuv for anybody to recognize it because it's a very internal, private thing for the Mashiach himself. It's the same thing. This is what happened with Shlomo. You look at when Shlomo Melech was anointed, right? At that time, when Adoniyahu was making the move to take over, saying, I'm going to be king, what actually happened then? When David commanded that Shlomo be crowned, it was something that happened. It was only a small group of people in Yerushalayim who were present at that initial coronation of David Melech. So, it was only after this, when it came up to the point when Shlomo actually had to practically lead the entire kingdom. If he's pashta malchusa al kol Yisrael, that's when his melucha spread to all the people. But if the rule b'shenis al kol ha'am, and then he actually had his second coronation in front of all the people. Al derech zeh gam etzel Shaul, and we find the same thing with Shaul. Shebe'etzach Torah nemar v'yelch l'imoy ha'chayil she'naga l'kim b'libo. At the very first time when Shmuel went to go crown Shaul Hamelech or anoint him, it says he went with him with his people who had this feeling of Hashem in their heart. In other words, there was a portion of the people who went with this, understood that Shaul was crowned or anointed, and there was another part of the nation who completely made fun of the whole thing. It was only afterwards that when he led the people and he was victorious in the war against Bnei Ammon, then that's only when everybody acknowledged his melucha. And then again, he was crowned a second time by everybody. So we can say the same thing will happen with Mashiach. The first stage, when there is a revelation of the Metzias of Melech Mashiach, that he is Mashiach, this isn't yet a revelation for all the Jewish people. It's only those few, the Chayil, the Chayolim, the soldiers who are with them, those close people who feel this in their heart. They understand this is what it's about. And those are the people who have this recognition and this connection, this inner connection with the king. But when he's going to be victorious in all the wars, and he's going to build a base Mikdash, and now then everybody, the entire world, all of the Jewish world will recognize it. Not only the Jewish world, but all the world. Everybody, all the people. So that should give us some food for thought for the week. This concept that there are the stages, and when we see all this talk about the idea of Haftarah and signing the proclamation of the Haftarah, it is an important step because it's this idea of recognizing that Mashiach is Mashiach. Okay, and we'll continue Mr. Hashem next week to talk about his Galus Mashiach with the reign of what this looks like in our generation, specifically.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Sarah. Thank you, Rifki. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We should be already next week in Yerushalayim with
Amen.
Mashiach in the third stage of complete revelation.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Kol tov.